So going to the course agenda of today, we see that today we will cover ASCP overview, scenario flow. In the scenario flow, we will be covering the multi-org structure, setting up the multi-org structure, the inventory module of Oracle, the bills of material, the work in progress, the purchasing, order management, and the MRP. So all these modules setups are prerequisites for ASCP, because ASCP is the planning module of Oracle, which actually requires data from every field to come up with some meaningful data. So we will see that in the due course of time. Next we will cover the setup of ASCP data, and then we will cover the create sample data, how to run the collections, what are the constraint plans and the plan options, and lastly we will cover the calendars. So this is the course agenda as of today. So going forward, here we see that the Oracle supply chain capabilities are spread across multiple modules of Oracle. As I said, that Oracle planning module requires data from every other module of Oracle. So we see that this Oracle supply chain capability stand upon two pillars, the suppliers and the customers. So what we buy.
Yeah, hi Aditya.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think the mic is very close to your mouth. If you adjust it.
Okay, sure. Now is it better?
Yeah, somewhat better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So as I was saying, like there are two pillars, the suppliers and the customers, and in between Oracle, I would say, plays with the data or maybe massages the data to make it a meaningful data for the management to see all the whatever is happening in the business and to make meaningful decisions out of that. So that is the whole point. And as I say so, we see that there are different modules like materials planning, materials requirement planning, production planning, then inventory, okay, so order management, and then supply chain, advanced supply chain planning. So all these modules are interrelated. So as we see that these modules are kind of come into different domains of Oracle. For example, the network sourcing or the production planning comes under the domain of SNO, which is nothing but the strategic network optimization, like which deals with how the suppliers are affected due to the changing market prices of the products. So, and for example, IO, the inventory optimization, okay, it deals with how the safety stocks plays an important role in the planning. Okay, how the businesses will maintain their safety stock for a better planning solution or a better customer experience. Now there are aspects of ASCP which we will definitely cover in this course, which is the purpose of this course, and we will go ahead and see what all are included in ASCP. The OTM is nothing but the Oracle Trade Management, which deals with the containers or the transportation of the goods from either the suppliers to the business or from the business to the customers. So it is totally dependent upon the containers. The production scheduling, the PS or the production scheduling, is nothing but which deals with the scheduling of the jobs in your business so that can be optimized to get a better productivity out of the business. So these are all the modules, the demand draw, the GOP, all these modules are kind of interrelated, and they do act as an input to the ASCP planning engine. So we'll see that all that in the subsequent slides. So any questions on this?
Yes, Aditya. Here I have a dot. OTM in the sense Oracle Transportation Management or Oracle Trade Management.
No, Oracle Transportation Management. Yes, that's true.
Okay.
It's an Oracle transportation management, and yes, it deals with all the types of containers, or how to effectively use the container capacity to transport goods from supplier to the business or the business to the customers.
Okay. Okay. Yep. That's all. No question.
So, okay, fine. So let me move ahead to the next slide. Yeah, the next slide talks about the ASCP overview, which is principally, as I said, like all the modules are interdependent and they act as an input to ASCP. So as we see here, that all the modules like purchasing, inventory, work in progress, bill of material, order management. So all these modules are act as a um, data manipulator. All the modules manipulates the data of the business and make it a meaningful. To make it a meaningful data out of this, we use the ASCP planning engine. So in the center of this lies the two kind of two data store of ASCP, which is nothing but the ODS and the PDS, which is the operational data store and the planning data store. So what it does is basically, when planning pulls all the data from different modules of inventory, purchasing, or order management, it stores the data in some tables which lies under the ODS, okay, the operational data store. Okay, this is a kind of staging area, you can say. Okay, wherein after the this is where the data are stored when the planning collections run. That is when all the data from different modules are collected and put into the ODS. Okay,
Okay.
that is called the collections. So once the ODS is populated, then run the planning engine. Okay, wherein the planning engine takes up all the data from the ODS store, okay, massages the data and make it a meaningful data, and suggests the planner that when and how much of the quantity of a product to buy. Okay, that is called the PDS. So finally the data reaches the PDS store. Okay, so the difference at this point of time, since we are discussing about ODS and PDS, okay, first let me ask if there are any questions and then I will go forward.
No, it's clear.
Okay. So ODS and PDS, since we are discussing, I would like to say that any data which is lying in the ASCP table with the plan ID as -1 is the ODS data, whereas any data with a valid plan ID of not -1 or 0 with a valid plan ID are the PDS data. Okay, so the data before the plan engine runs is the ODS, and after the plan engine runs is the PDS. So I will move ahead to the next slide, which is the scenario description, which is a kind of scenario description of ASCP. Okay, as I said, like ASCP deals with two kinds of data. One is the transactional data, one is the master data. Okay, so the transactional data is nothing but the data which comes out of the business on transacting the material. For example, inventory transactions. For example, inventory transactions like move orders or any miscellaneous transactions. Those are the transactional data. Or maybe in order management, the sales orders, the picking, shipping of sales orders. Those are the transactional data. What are the master data? The master data are for example, the customers, the suppliers, the items. All these are the master data. So as we see that ASCP does collect all the data, the master data as well as the transactional data, because ASCP is a process wherein uh, it has to deal with the transactional data on a day-to-day basis. But if the master data has changed overnight, it has to know that what has changed and whether to bring those data into ASCP and see the transactions and propose something. Okay, so that is the reason it deals with both the master data as well as the transactional data. Okay, and the collection process you have an option to collect the transactional data as well as the master data from the EBS modules. Okay. Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, no.
Okay, fine. So the data collected from different EBS modules are then massaged and then to come up with a meaningful data set. By the meaningful data set, what I mean is it will see all the, basically the business will have its own supply and demand. So ASCP sees the supply, demand, the stock, the every aspect of the data, and it massages the data and come up with a meaningful data like how much quantity to buy at what point of time. So that this is just a suggestion of ASCP, and ASCP does give some exceptions as well. For example, if the customer order of an item of a product cannot be met, then it will definitely give you an exception saying why it cannot be met. Are there any constraints, any capacity constraints, or anything else, like the supplier is delaying the material due to which the customer orders might be delayed. So all these suggestions, all these exceptions are given by ASCP to the planner, which helps the planner to make the right decision. So any questions on this before I move to the next slide?
No.
So the scenario flow is like, for the ASCP to function properly, we have to have all the modules in place wherein the ASCP will collect the transactional data and the master data. So the all the modules in the sense like it has to have the multi-org master data setup, the inventory setup, the BOM setup, the OM setup, the PO setup, the WIP setup. So all the modules has to be set up in the instance before we can go ahead and implement ASCP. Okay, and one other point I would like to mention here is kind of like ASCP is a module which can act globally. Okay, it is not dependent upon any particular organization.
Yeah.
Like unlike yeah,
Aditya, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Here, just want to understand
yeah.
as a part of this course, which modules
Mhm.
will be covered. Here, you given like just inventory, BOM, and all. Exactly which modules we are going to focus, where we do the system configuration and transaction process, finally to work on this planning.
Yeah, so we will be covering broadly all the modules listed here, like inventory, BOM, OM, PO, WIP. Okay, and a brief overview of how the setups are done, and
Okay.
then we will move ahead to the ASCP, our main agenda for the day.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So the process is like we have to set up the master data, we have to set up the ERP master data, then we have to set up the ASCP master data, then we have to run the collections, and once we run the collections, we run the plan, and which brings the data ultimately to the planning server, which is nothing but the PDS, which we
Okay.
have already seen.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so these are the setups which we generally do, means these are the sequence of setups which we do generally for multi-org, for inventory, bills of materials, work in process, for all the modules. So for multi-org, as you can see, we can set up the business group, then set up the ledger, then set up the legal entity. These are the sequence of steps we do for the setups. The material planning also, for example, the last one, we set up the planning parameters, we set up the forecasts. So all these setups, I'm not going through each and every box, but you can have a look of all the setups, and we can discuss if you have any queries.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of minutes to go through this slide.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Understood, Aditya.
Okay, fine. So I'll move ahead to the next one, which is nothing but, again, this is also comes under preparation of planning and setting up the setting up the ASCP, for example, setting up the planning instance, assigning the organizations to the instance, which organizations will be ASCP enabled. Okay, so optionally we can set up something called as we can set up something called as unique collection groups. Yeah, so that, for example, a collection group can consist of 3 ACP organizations. So when you run that collection group, only the data of those 3 organizations will be collected, and we can see the planning recommendations of those 3 organizations only.
Okay.
So these are some of the setups which we can do in ACP before we start.
Okay.
Going to the next one, setting up the ERP data, okay, which is a very important aspect before we can use ASCP. Yeah. So what we do is generally we log in into the applications, and we are seeing the inventory setups first. So we go into inventory, and then the setup organizations. Once we go there, we generally, yeah, we set up the business group. Yeah, this is how it is set up, giving all the fields like the flex field structures, everything.
Okay.
Okay, this is just an overview. This is not the intent of the course, but this is just an overview or a background. For ASCP to work, you need all these modules set up. So I wanted to give a background of those.
Okay.
So setting up the legal entity, again, this is also a vital setup. Setting up the ledger. Okay, I'm not going through each and everything, but if you have any questions or queries, you can just let me know.
Okay.
Setting up the operating unit, okay, and setting up the inventory organization. So you set up the business group, the legal entity, the ledger, the operating unit, and the inventory organization as a part of the multi-org setup.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you set up the sub-inventory, okay, which are nothing but the actual store where you store the material in inventory.
Okay.
Okay. And then we set up the multi-org profile options. These are the multi-org profile options like the MO operating units, the HR cross business group or the HR business groups, the ledger. Yeah, all these profile options are set. Multi-org.
Okay.
And then we move ahead with the actual inventory setup. The previous setup what we were seeing was the multi-org setup. So now we are moving to the inventory setup.
Okay.
So in the organizations, as we set up the inventory organizations, we set up the different parameters of each organization. Okay, the inventory parameters, the costing information, okay, all the different parameters. So this is what you are seeing is showing the parameters of an organization. Okay, so you can set up an organization as a WMS enabled organization, okay, or an EAM enabled organization. So all those setups has to be done here. The costing, the what accounts the transactions are going to hit in terms of costing, all those information are set up in the inventory parameters or organization parameters. So setting up the receiving parameters, this talks about the parameters they will use when you are receiving a purchase order. Okay, so what accounts gets hit and what are the numbering convention of the receipts, all these setups.
Okay.
Right. Setting up the item categories, again, how to set up how to categorize the items. Okay, this plays a very important role in ASCP in terms of often the business asks for setting up ASCP and seeing the data as per category of a product. For example, you are running a business, you are running an electronics business, and you know that in the segment of mobile phones, how much we are how much stock we have, or how much stock we need to build to meet the customer orders, or maybe means all those type of reports. So what you do is you categorize the items as per the mobile phones, and you put all the mobile phones into that category, and you can use that category in advanced supply chain planning um, to recommend suggestion for that category.
Okay.
So here how it is set up, the item categories. Yeah. Any questions from anybody?
No, no.
Okay, fine. So setting up the inventory items, here we have we are seeing that how to set up each inventory item. Obviously this is the most important setup, one of the most important setup of ASCP. So we have to enter the list price, we have to take a template. Okay, we have to see whether it is a make or a buy item, which is a very important aspect in ASCP, because if it is a buy item, we are going to buy it from a supplier or procure it from a supplier. But if it is a make item, we have to build it in our shop floor. So or we can, if it is a make item, we can also procure it from some other warehouse of within the same operating unit. I mean inter-organization transfer. So that is also an aspect which ACP can suggest.
Okay.
Instead of buying, maybe the transfer of the goods will be more cost effective or more time effective. So ACP does consider all those factors before suggesting anything.
Okay.
So we have to give the prices, we have to give the planning method, MSC. This is another very important, the fourth box which you are seeing, which is called as MRP MPP planned. Okay, so if an item is not MRP MPP planned, or not MRP planned, or not MRP MPS planned, it will not flow into ACP. Even you run data collections, it will not come into ACP. This is a very important point which can be noted.
Okay.
So going ahead, assigning the items to the organizations, obviously this is important. And then coming up to the bill of material setup. So this one, first we set up the bill of material parameters, okay, wherein we define different parameters of bill of material, how to use that. We can set up the resource, we will set up the resource. Okay, these are all required for the shop floor setup or the work in progress setup. Means whatever you build in your shop floor, the bill of material is very, very important for that aspect. So setting up the resource, here we can set up the resource, we can give the resource cost and the resource overhead cost and the resource rates. Okay. We will set up the departments here. So what resources are attached to which departments. Okay, here we can give the department overhead rates or overhead costs if there are any. Okay, all these costs will add up to while building up the assembly in your shop floor.
Okay.
We will set up the BOM and the alternate BOM. This is where we set up the structure of the assembly, what components the assembly is built with, and we give the routing. We define the routing, like for example what processes or what resources we will be using to create that BOM. So all those stuffs we will be defining here, routing, and then we will come to the cost and lead time roll-up. So this is again a very important aspect wherein the assembly cost roll-up happens, and it rolls up the costs of each component, whether it be the material cost, the overhead cost, the resource cost, any cost, and we will finally come up with the final cost of the assembly, the material cost, the overhead cost, and the resource cost of the assembly.
Okay.
Okay, and also we will be rolling up the lead times. For example, there are as you might be be knowing that there are three kinds of lead times, mainly the processing, the pre-processing, and the post-processing lead time. And there are fixed lead times and variable lead times also. So all those lead times of the components gets rolled up to achieve or to come up with the final lead times of the assembly.
Okay.
So work in process setup, we will see that yeah, these are the setups which are attached to the work in process, which is the main module of manufacturing the goods in your shop floor. So different parameters here, and then we did not go through the different parameters. You can, if you want, you can go through the different parameters in the vision instance. And then we come up with the accounting class, like what accounts are hit when you manufacture a product. For example, the material overhead, the resource, and if there are any variance, whatever was planned and whatever the final outcome is, if there is a variance between the two, which variance account it will hit. So all these account setups are done in the WIP setups. Okay.
Okay.
So any questions on till now?
No questions, Aditya.
Okay, fine. So let me go ahead and we'll see the purchasing setups, a brief overview. Okay. The purchasing parameters, like how are the numbering methods, okay, what are the internal requisitions, what are the sources, okay, and what are the expense accounts or the accounts which will be hit, okay, what will be the matching option of the POs. So all these options are set up in the purchasing options.
Okay.
The financial options again in purchasing will tell me all the accounts, the liability, the prepayment, all the variance accounts which will be hit in purchasing. Okay, and also in the financial options we do set up a purchasing validation organization. Okay, wherein whatever products you are purchasing from the supplier, the attributes of those products will be validated against this purchasing validation organization. Okay, so if you are making, if the, for example, the item, if you are making as non-stockable in the purchasing validation organization, then obviously that will be treated as an expense item while you do the purchasing.
Okay.
So going ahead, purchasing document types. Okay, there are different purchasing document types, like there are standard purchase orders, there are blankets, there are quotation, there are catalogs. Okay, so all types of purchase orders are there, and you can choose any one purchase order and you can modify the attributes, how the approval happens, okay, which workflow the approval goes through, okay, and whether you can change certain things in the purchase orders. All these things can be done under the document type setup. So coming to the approval limits, again we have to set up the buyers and their approval limits, and we have to say that okay, a clerk has a certain approval limit, the manager has a senior manager has a certain approval limit, and ultimately the VP has a certain approval limit. So all those limits has to be set up in here, okay, so that the purchase order flows through different hierarchy before it can get finally approved. So setting up the buyers again, the buyers has to be set up who actually does the buying and who actually creates the purchase order in the system. And then we have to set up the supplier and the supplier sites. Okay, and finally we have to set up the sourcing rules. By the sourcing rules, what we mean is this also plays a very important factor in ASCP, because based on how you set up the sourcing rules, ASCP will determine whether it should be bought from a supplier, whether it will be bought from one supplier or multiple suppliers, and if from multiple suppliers, what will be the percentage, Like for example, 40% I will buy from supplier A and 60% I will buy from supplier B. So that those type of features you can specify in the sourcing rules. Okay. Also, you can say that you can transfer material from different warehouses. Okay, that also can be a option. And all, or you can make at some of your manufacturing plant. So there are three options: either buy from, or transfer from, or make at.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so these options are set up in the sourcing rules in purchasing. Okay, based on which ASCP will suggest whether you will need to buy, or you need to transfer, or you need to make.
Okay.
Okay, so going ahead, I suppose there are no questions on this.
No questions.
Right. So going ahead, again, the sourcing rules has to be attached to the assignment sets, which is nothing but attaching the item, the actual product with the sourcing rule, and yes, now we come up with the order management setups, wherein we'll see some of the setups of order management. Okay, so the order management system parameters, we generally set up first, and then we come up with the transaction types, which is nothing but the setup of the order types. Okay, we set up the document numbering, how the order numbering will happen, and we set up the shipping parameters. Okay, during shipping of the sales orders, what are the parameters, or how the system will default the things. The inter-org shipping networks. This is again a very important parameter, wherein we see that when we are transferring from one org to the another org, whether it needs an internal order, that means whether it needs to be recorded in the system, or it can be just a simple inter-org transfer wherein it will just hit the accounts of the two orgs. Okay, and if it is transfer from one org to another, and if you need an internal order, whether it will be a direct transfer, or it can be an in-transit transfer. Okay, and how the receiving happens in the other orgs, what are the accounts getting hit. So all these things can be defined under the shipping networks.
Okay.
So set up the shipping documents. Again, what all the documents will get printed once you do the shipping. These documents will automatically get printed. For example, I can think of two examples, like the packing list and the bill of lading documents, which generally gets printed and which generally gets attached to the shipped goods. So those documents are printed, and then we come to the customer sites. This is nothing but the master data. Okay, so customer and customer sites has to be defined before you can place the order. So all this, and also in the customer setup, you have to attach the internal locations if you are if you want to do an inter-org transfer with the internal order thing. So
Okay.
so coming up to the material planning setup, MRP setup, I believe this is the last setup before we go ahead with the ASCP setups. Okay, so the material planning setup is the setup of the parameters, material planning parameters. Okay, and the forecasts. Obviously, this forecast provide a very important input for the ASCP. Without the forecast, the ASCP cannot calculate how the supply and demand picture will be in the future. Okay, so if you are forecasting for, say, down the line 6 months, then obviously you have to be much accurate in your forecast to be able to come up with an ASCP recommendation which will actually help your business. So forecast has to be very, very accurate in the system. Okay, going ahead to the next screenshot, which is nothing but the forecast screenshot again. These are how the forecast quantities are provided, like and the dates on which the forecasts are made, future dates I mean. And now we come up to the finally the ASCP data, which is the agenda of the course. So any questions till now before we begin ASCP?
No questions.
Okay. So in ASCP, what we do is we first define the instances. Okay, this is the basic, the initial setup of ASCP. Okay, so once we define the instance, we have to attach the organizations to the instance. Okay, which all organizations you want to be ASCP planned.
Okay.
Yeah, so here are the organizations you can enable, and demand planning enabled also you can do from here only. Okay, demand planning is nothing but related to global order promising. Okay. And here you can also give the collection group. As I mentioned previously, if you remember, we can define one collection group and maybe 2 organizations comes under that collection group. So when you run the plan for that particular collection group, only those 2 organizations will be considered while for planning.
Okay.
Group orgs, yeah, this is the collection group as I was saying previously. Okay. So if you run the plan for the MF chip by collection group, if you plan for all the 3 organizations.
Okay.
So yeah, going ahead, creating the inventory item. This is again a repetition. I am not going through this. Bill of materials, create BOM item. All this was this thing. Okay. So these are the creation of the sales orders. Okay, these I am not going through in very details, but this is how the sales orders are created in the system. Okay, and then we have the we have defined the purchase orders. Okay, and the discrete jobs. Okay, these are nothing but the setups of the sales orders, purchase order, discrete jobs, so that you can means just to show you how they are defined. Okay, ultimately the ASCP recommendations will be converted either to a purchase order or a WIP job.
Okay.
Based on how your customer orders are placed or how you do the forecasting. Okay, so discrete jobs, yes, all the discrete jobs are. This is how the discrete jobs are made, and next come the supply chain plan. Okay, this is the ASCP plan wherein you define a plan. Okay, you can define a plan either from the scratch or you can copy from a existing plan. Okay, so we are copying a plan, and we will show you what are the plan options which we will define in the subsequent slides. So first let us go through the collections, how the data collections are run, then we will come back to the plan options.
Okay.
Okay. So the data collections are, as I said, like there are two stores. One is the operational data store and another is the planning data store, ODS and the PDS. So during data collection, 2 processes runs. One to load the ODS, okay, and basically both the things load to ODS only. Okay, the PDS is loaded once the plan is launched. Okay, so these are the 2 processes. One is the planning data pull, which pulls the data from the ERP or the transactional system. Another thing I forgot to mention is kind of like ASCP can talk to either Oracle ERP or any other third-party system also. Okay, any transactional system you have, you can plug in ASCP and use ASCP. Okay. So having said that, like ASCP will pull the data from the transactional system by the planning data pull process. Okay, and once it gets loaded into the staging, okay, it will again run the planning ODS load to finally load the planning tables with the plan ID as -1. As I said previously, all ODS data has a plan ID of -1.
Okay.
Okay, so once that gets loaded, now we are ready to launch the plan, and the plan can look into the ODS data, okay, and see what are the supply demand picture and what are the stocks, on hand stocks, and see what are the constraints, and then propose to the business the best way to buy or make or transfer items.
Okay.
Yeah, so the parameters for the standard collections are the planning data pool. There are different parameters. Okay, you have the option of collecting what you need and what you don't. Okay, so you can you may say that I don't want to collect, for example, calendars, or I don't want to collect items because I know that there were no items defined in the previous few weeks. Okay, so you can say that as I don't want to collect receipts, pure receipts. Okay, so all these things you can control. It is on the under the user control. Okay, so and also at this point of time, let me tell you one thing. There are two types of collection methods. Okay, one is the complete refresh, one is the targeted refresh. Okay, there is a third one which is not that important, so I'm not going through that. Okay, the complete refresh is nothing but whatever you do, it will collect the data completely. It will purge the previous data, flush out the previous data, okay, and completely run the complete data collection will happen on all each and every item, each and every customer, each and every transactions, and then it will populate the ODS. Okay, the targeted refresh is nothing but whatever you have changed since the last data collection, only those data will be collected.
Okay. Aditya, here I have one. I need small clarification. You are telling it will purge the data. Which data it will be
Hmm.
purging? The data which is already
The
collected, that data will be purged. Or
yes. The
okay.
ODS data totally it will be purging and bringing in the fresh data.
Okay.
The whatever you have done, you it will be bringing the fresh data out for the complete refresh.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and there is a targeted refresh as I said.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
so going ahead, I hope there are no other questions.
No.
Okay. So going ahead, this yeah, you can say that there are few more parameters listed wherein you can choose either yes or no, and you can say ASCP engine what to collect and what not to collect.
Okay.
Yeah. So the planning ODS load again has a very few parameters. Okay, because the main thing depends upon the planning data pool, what you pulled from the transactional system. Okay. So here you will just say like what are the timeout minutes, the number of workers. These are system defaults, and generally businesses do not change this unless very much required, and this will uh, affect the performance of the planning ODS data load. Okay. And also to mention here, typical collection with the medium size volume size of data will take around 1.5 to 2 hours to run. The planning data pool and the planning ODS load combined, I'm saying.
Okay. Again, it may depends on volume of data, right? It
Yeah,
will
it
be.
might depend on the volume. Obviously. I'm
Okay.
telling just a very basic thing.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So once that planning, yeah, all parameters are populated, you just submit the data collections. Okay. And yeah, so you see whatever bombs, whatever purchase orders, whatever work orders, whatever we defined in the previous slides came here, came to ASCP,
Okay.
right? Okay. So next we will coming to the constraint plan. They going back to the previous slide, they are nothing but the supply and demand picture of the business as of today. Okay, based on this, if we make some forecasting or some transactions, uh, based on this, the when we run the plan based on all these purchase orders, work orders, sales orders, the system will suggest how much planned orders it will create, and it will suggest that okay, you can buy say 30 quantity of goods on this and this date. Okay, or we can make some goods on this and this date to meet the customer demands.
Okay.
Okay, that we will see in the subsequent slides after the plan launch.
Okay.
Okay, this is just the data collection part till the ODS. Okay, we have not gone till the PDS till now.
Okay.
So constraint plans, again, constraint plans are nothing but the plans which take into consideration the material, the resource, the capacity constraints of the suppliers or of the shop floor resources. Okay, before it can suggest some some dates on when we can do the purchasing, or when we can start making the items. Okay, so it is you can say a more accurate planning method, wherein the plan will suggest a more accurate date rather than unconstrained plan. Okay, the unconstrained plan do not take into consideration all the capacity constraints of the resources or the suppliers, but the constraint plan does. So it can say that also the constraint plan can suggest you if you have some say alternate item, alternate product. Okay, for example, you are selling mobile phones and you are giving say Nokia 5510 some models, okay, to the customers, but if by any chance 5510 is not available, you want the system to suggest Nokia 5520 for the customer. Okay, so you can use that as a substitute item, and the ASCP can also see that if there are no stocks available or there are no supplies available from suppliers for this particular Nokia 5510, then it can suggest Nokia 5520, and you can buy that and sell it to the customer if customer agrees so.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so what we will see is after this module you will be able to describe the concepts, describe the constraints, what are the demand priority rules, and what are the calendars, how the constraint planning works, what are the plan options, and we can review the constraint plans. Okay. So going ahead, yeah, we can enforce the capacity constraints, enforce demand due dates. Okay, so the constraint plan is of two types. One is the enforced capacity constraints, which we generally call as the ECC plan, and another is the enforced demand due dates, which is called as the EDD plan.
Okay.
Okay, so it depends upon the business what is your priority, whether you do not want to overload the capacity of the resources and the suppliers, or you have to meet the customer demand whatever it is. You can overload the supplier, you can overload the resources, but you have to meet the customer demand date. So it depends upon how the business, what is the business priority basically,
Okay.
right? So and based on that we can say set certain decision rules. Okay, we can do some plan type comparisons. We will see in the subsequent slides. Yeah, so enforced capacity plan constraint is nothing but balancing the supply and demand across the supply chain by respecting the constraints, I would say.
Okay.
Okay, so it will respect the constraints of the resources and the suppliers and whatever parties are involved in making the goods, and then it will suggest some dates. The planning run generates a plan that does not violate manufacturing. Yeah, so as I said, means whatever is written here, I have already said it. Like based on without violating the constraints of the suppliers and the resources, it will suggest some dates.
Okay.
Yeah. So Oh, that one is for the capacity constraints. It respects the capacity constraints, and this one is for the demand due dates. Okay, this one also respects the constraints, but to some extent. For example, if it is seeing that it is not meeting the customer demand dates, obviously it will overload the supplier, it will overload the business, it will overload the resources, and it will say that okay, to meet the customer demand, we need we need uh, we need the material on this date. Okay, whether it exceeds the capacity constraints or not. Yeah, the decision rules are some additional instructions to the planning engine to use the substitute and alternate products. Okay, that I have already said previously. So there, here you can say that okay, if you are not, as I gave the example of Nokia 5510 and Nokia 5520, so you can say the ASCP planning engine to suggest alternate products if the original product is not available, or to suggest alternate routings, alternate bill of materials, so that the preparation or the making of the assembly becomes faster. So all these decision rules can be put into the ASCP planning options. Yeah, so the decision rules are mainly they use alternate sources, use alternate BOM routings, use alternate resources, substitutes, components. Okay, so yeah, so still now.
Yep.
Okay, so the enforced capacity constraints, as you see, like demands may be late, the resource capacity, supply capacity is not violated. Okay, and the lead time, planning time fence is violated. Okay, so enforced capacity constraints see that the capacities are honored in the system. Okay. There is a small mistake in the first one. The second point should not have been resource capacity, supply capacity violated. It should be not violated. Just read it as not violated. Yeah, the constraint plans again are these the resource capacity, the supply capacity are violated. The demands are on time, and the lead time, planning time fence may be violated. And the constraints with decision rules, okay, means maybe with ECC or EDD, we see that the alternates are honored, and whatever it takes to meet the customer demand, the system will suggest so using the substitutes.
Okay.
So going ahead, okay, example of constraints are the material constraint, the resource constraints mainly, and there is another one called as the supplier constraint as well. Okay, so an example might be a material constraint might be a supplier make deliveries only on Mondays. This might be a constraint. Okay, maybe the organization, the business receives goods only on Fridays. Okay, these might be a constraint. Okay, resource constraint, the resources are available from 7 to 3:30 maybe. Okay, so these are all the type of typical constraints which the businesses use. Okay. Yeah, so constraints again, as I said, like you see the enforced capacity constraints, we are seeing that both the capacity constraint and material and resource constraints are yes. So if the resource capacity is 60 and the material capacity is 50, okay, it will honor the 50 because 50 is less than 60, and it will say that never go above the capacity of 50. Okay, whatever be the demand date. Means it can override the demand date, and it can say that okay, even if the demand date is on say 9th of September, it can suggest a planned order for say 30th of September to meet the demand. Yeah, so it is enforcing the capacity constraints. If you are not enforcing the capacity constraints, then obviously if the demand is of 75 and if you have a resource capacity of and a material capacity of 60 and 50, it will override that, and it will say that okay, create a planned order of 75 on this date, whatever the constraints are. I don't care about the constraints. Okay, this is nothing but the non-enforced constraints or the enforced demand due date EDD plan.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, going to the plan options, I had said that we will talk about the plan options in detail. Okay, so in the plan options, there are planned items, whether you want to plan for all items or you want to plan for demand schedule items. By demand schedule items, what we mean is the items which are placed in the forecasts, or the items which are placed in the MDS, or the items which you want to plan for. Okay, so there is a particular category of demand schedule items. So you can say that material scheduling method is the order start date or whatever dates you want to make. This is nothing but the scheduling of the component. For example, if you are giving as the order start date, then seeing the order start date, the ASCP engine will suggest you the date of when to start making the item.
Okay.
Okay, if you make it as the order schedule date, okay, it will see the order schedule date and it will suggest the WIP job start date, or the making of means the start date of making the item. Okay, based on what it suggests, that's what you are setting here, based on either the order start date or the order schedule date.
Okay.
Okay, and then there is something called a schedule date demand priority rule. Okay, demand priority rule is optional. Okay, you can or you may not use also. Override all is nothing but, okay, specifies the restrictions on deleting and placing planned orders within the planning horizon. Okay, so there is a planning horizon that you define, which is called nothing but the planning time fence. Okay, what it means is within that time fence you are going to plan for the items. Okay, the ASCP planning engine cannot plan for the items for the next 5 years. Okay, because it can plan, but obviously the timing of the plan will definitely increase, and you do not need, also the business do not need to plan for the next 5 years. Right? So the businesses set up this planning horizon based on how the business wants to plan for the items. Okay,
Aditi, here
so
I have one question.
yeah,
Max, how many years we can do the planning here as per the system?
there is no limitation as such.
Okay.
Okay, but as and when you increase the planning horizon, okay, obviously the plan run time will increase.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Okay, yeah. So so you say here override all means you are going to again, um, the planned orders are going to be flushed out totally, and then new planned orders are created. This is nothing but we had seen previously in the data collections about the complete refresh and the targeted refresh. This is something like that, but this is more related to the generation of the plans. Okay, that was the previous one was related to the collection of the data. This is related to the generation of the plan, whether the planned orders are overwritten every time or the plan orders are kept as it is and new planned orders are keep on adding something. Okay, so that is these options can be set here. Okay, peg supplies by demand. Okay, you can peg the supplies to demand. What that means is you can relate what supplies are considered by the system to meet up a particular demand. Okay, so that one, if you check this box, then in the planning workbench, what the planners can see is, okay, I have a demand of say 2000 quantity on say 31st of March, so I can drill down that 2000 quantity demand and see that what all supplies the ACP engine has related for that demand. Okay, so by this way the planners can say, okay, I don't want this supply to go into this demand, maybe I will change this supply to the other demand. That also can be done.
Okay.
So they can manipulate the data.
Okay.
Okay. Going ahead with the planning time fence, as I said, okay, the planning time fence is the time fence within which the planning happens, and also within the planning, no, sorry, the planning, not the planning time fence. The planning horizon is the time fence within the planning, within what the planning happens. But the planning time fence is a period wherein the business does not want to release any planned orders. For example, we are planning for the next 1.5 years. So the planning horizon is 1.5 years. But the planning time fence is say 60 days. That means within the first 60 days, I do not want any planned orders to get released, because I know that the suppliers or our shop floor guys cannot make the material within the first 60 days.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the demand time fence is again, yeah. So demand time fence is again the time fence within which you cannot create a forecast of a particular item. Okay, because the business knows that within that time fence the forecasts is not honored. Within that time fence they want actual demands. They do not want to forecast. Okay, so you can keep a demand time fence of say 20 days or 30 days and say that within this 20-30 days I do not want to forecast for an item. Instead, I want the actual demands, the actual sales orders from the customers.
Okay.
That is the demand time fence. And the release time fence is nothing but, release time fence is also similar to planning time fence. Okay. It will not allow you to release within the particular release time fence.
Okay.
Okay. So, any questions?
No.
So going ahead. Yeah, this is the whatever you are seeing in the screen now is the planning horizon. Okay, this is the plan start date and the plan end date. This is the planning horizon. So you see that from 23rd January, so the planning horizon is 1 year. And how you are splitting the buckets. For example, are you going to plan at the micro level, that is at the days level, till what? For the first 90 days, they are going to plan at the daily bucket level. That is, they are going to see how the demands are changing daily, and how the suppliers are getting paid to the demands for the first 90 days. Next, for the 13 weeks, next for the 13 periods, they want to track the demand and supply picture weekly.
Okay.
Okay, and next for the 6 periods, they want to see the demand and supply picture monthly, because going forward the demands and supply may change, okay, after 1 year, right? So for the last 6 months we do not bother much from now that how the demand and supply will be at that point of time. Okay, so that the last 6 months we have kept the monthly bucket. We will see the demand supply picture in the monthly bucket. But the most important part is the first 30 days, for first 90 days, which is the first 3 months period, wherein we want to track the demand and supply daily.
Okay.
Okay, so this is up to the business how they want to set up, but this is one of the typical setups.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, these are the organizations of what all you want to plan for. Like you want to plan for the net purchases, the safety stocks, the sales orders, everything. Okay, these are the options. Again, these options can be overwritten by the collections. Okay, while you are doing the collections, you can say that, okay, even if include sales orders is yes for that organization, but I don't want to run collections for the sales orders. Okay, so you can make the sales orders as no, and then run the collections. Okay, but if you say it as yes there in the collections, and if for that organization the include sales orders is unchecked here, that means the sales orders would not be collected for that organization.
Okay.
These are at the organization level, basically, you can say.
Okay.
Okay,
So
and that one you
organization level, we are just setting the controls which are allowed and
setting the controls, correct,
okay.
which are allowed and which are not, right?
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. And also in the below screen, below box, red box, you are setting that which forecast you are going to use as a source for that organization, which forecast set rather.
Okay.
Okay, for each organization, you have to define a forecast in ERP, and you have to specify that forecast set here so that ASCP considers the forecast from that forecast set and then calculates all the demand supply and suggests the plan.
Okay.
Okay. So going forward, the constraint plans, again, as I said, the constraints are of two types, ECC and EDD. Okay, so here you see that the EDD plan is checked. That means the demand due date has to be met, whatever the constraints are. Okay, you can set all the parameters like which constraints you want to consider, the resource constraint, the supply capacity constraint, okay, all those things. Okay. And going ahead to the optimization, these are like the businesses can use if they are using very advanced feature of advanced supply chain planning, because generally businesses, I have never seen businesses using this. Okay, so these are kind of, again, KPIs you can say for the businesses. Okay, if the business have certain KPIs and they have to meet those KPIs, obviously they can optimize all these things, and they can set the parameters here so that ASCP will means plan more accurately.
Mhm.
Okay. The decision rules, again, as we saw that we can use 5 types of decision rules, whether you want to use end item substitution, you want to use alternate resources, bombs. Okay, and the reporting we generally do not use. Okay, order modifiers. Okay, these are nothing but in the item master screen, you can give this order modifiers as you want to release the planned orders as per a particular fixed lot multiple. For example, you do not want ASCP to suggest you planned orders of any quantity. You say that I have a fixed lot multiplier of say 1,000 quantity. Then ASCP will keep on aggregating the demands, and as and when it crosses 1,000 quantity, it will suggest a supply of 1,000 quantity. Okay, it will always suggest a supply in the multiples of 1,000. Okay, that is the fixed lot multiplier. The fixed day supply, again, you do not want to ASCP to suggest the planned orders on any day. You want to suggest the planned orders as per a fixed day supply. Okay, for example, you want ASCP to suggest after 30 days, after every 30 days. Okay, so if you give a fixed day supply of 30 days, so whatever the demands are in that 30 days bucket, that will be aggregated, and at a time the supply will be suggested after 30 days. Okay, and yeah, and the fixed order quantity also is nothing but it is kind of like, for example, fixed order quantity can be means it is, if you say 1,000, always it will suggest 1,000. Like fixed lot multiplier, it can be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, something like that. But fixed order quantity will always be 1,000, something like that. So these are the order modifiers what we say, and we can control.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are just the definitions. I'm not going through that. The calendars. Okay, this is the last portion of ASCP. Okay, the calendars are like, there are different kinds of calendars which are considered in ASCP and which can be used very effectively. And there are the carrier calendar, the supplier capacity calendar, okay, the organization calendar, organization receiving calendar. Okay, so all these calendars take a very good role in for ASCP to suggest the planned orders. Okay, so as we see that there are means in which order the calendars are honored. For example, the supplier or the supplier side calendar are honored first, and then the supplier site or supplier calendar are honored, then the carrier calendar, then the supplier calendar, and then the final organization 24/7 calendar are honored. So if you have defined any of the calendars, like for example supplier or supplier site calendar, and say carrier calendar. So before considering the normal 24/7 calendar of the organization, it will consider the supplier carrier calendar or the only the carrier calendar.
Okay.
Okay. So what it means is basically, for example, as I gave you an example, the supplier can ship only on Mondays. That means in the supplier shipping calendar, you can specify that only Monday as the working day. The other days are holiday.
Okay.
And you can attach that calendar as a supplier shipping calendar in the system. So that ASCP sees and says that even if the supplier can ship on a Wednesday, it will suggest to postpone it or prepone that to the previous Monday or the next Monday.
Okay.
Right? Similarly, the carrier also has holidays. Okay, so you can use that calendar, you can set up that calendar and use it as a carrier calendar in the system. And the ASCP will consider the carrier calendar and say that, okay, since you have 7 days holidays in between while that material are in transit, so the 7 days will be, you will have a delay of 7 days for receiving the material, since the carrier is a holiday for 7 days.
Okay. Aditya, is it
Right?
is something like these are the different levels we can set the calendar for to where system will pick?
Not different levels. Basically, what it will pick is if you have defined different type of calendars, for example, organization receiving, supplier shipping, carrier calendar. Okay, what is the order of
Oh,
preference
okay.
by means which the system sees all these calendars?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
it will consider ultimately all the calendars.
Okay.
Okay, it will consider all the calendars, but only thing is how the system will consider in order, in which order.
Okay. If you set all these, what is the priority system will pick?
Yeah, right. That is what it is showing in the by the
Okay.
arrow marks.
Okay.
The
Okay.
priority, the first priority will go to the customer site and carrier,
Okay. Okay.
then it will go to the customer site, then customer carrier, then customer, then 24/7
Yeah.
calendar.
Now,
So this
now
is
I
the
got it.
priority how the,
Yeah,
yeah,
I got it now. Yes.
okay, okay, fine. So the supplier site, yeah, 24/7. So all these calendars are shown here. I will not go through all each and everything. Okay, the only thing, yeah, I want to show here is like the processing lead time and the pre-processing lead time, whatever is was shown. Okay, uh, can depend upon the, we are seeing that organization manufacturing calendar. Okay, and after the pre-processing lead time, the start date of the WIP job starts, right? The start date of the WIP job starts. Okay, and after the processing lead time, the due date uh, of the material is there. Okay, so just to give you an example, kind of the pre-processing lead time and the processing lead time will depend upon the number of working days set up in the calendar. For example, if the pre-processing lead time is 10 days, that means that within that 10 days, if there are any holidays, that will be considered by ASCP and the system will suggest the dates accordingly.
Okay.
Okay, similarly for processing lead time as well. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So here it is a more complex situation. I do not want to make the example more complex. Okay, you can consider many times, and all these times will be related to one or the other calendar. For example, there might be organization manufacturing calendar, there might be supplier capacity calendar. Okay, there might be organization receiving calendar. Based on the holidays specified in the calendar, the pre-processing lead time, processing lead time, post-processing lead time, the transit time, everything might vary,
Okay.
whatever holidays or whatever working days you are setting up in the calendars, respective calendars.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. This is again another example of effect of calendars on planning output. So how the calendars are kind of, which calendars are considered. Obviously, if the material is in transit, obviously it will take all the holidays and the working days from the carrier calendar. Okay, when and as and when the organization when as and when the goods arrive at your organization, you will receive the goods based on the organization receiving calendar.
Okay.
Okay, so all these type of calendar has a different purpose. Okay, so all these purposes are shown here, and which times are dependent upon which calendars are shown here. Okay, the only thing we have to remember is all these calendars, whatever working days, holidays you are setting, the uh, there is some different purpose of that, and the, the working days will be calculated based on that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So ASCP calculation, yeah, how the dates are adjusted. Okay, again, this is an example, kind of. Okay, so if you are using an organization receiving calendar, okay, and you say that you only receive on Fridays, okay, and there is a carrier calendar which says that you only ship on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So how the system will calculate and how the system will push the dates or pull the dates accordingly. And this is what it is shown here. I think that's it from my side. So if you have any questions, you can ask, or
Yeah, Aditya. Let's see. I have a couple of questions. So
yeah, sure.
basically, I don't have any knowledge on this ERP applications and all. One of my friends suggested to do this course as well as he referred this ERP tree, and that's how I
Mm-hmm,
contacted. And even he
mm-hmm.
given some notes to check with the trainer whether those that way the training will be covered or not. Here, the expectation is so you will be just explaining the concept also, right? Before we get into the system, somewhat, I mean, theoretical explanation will be giving, right?
Yeah,
So that,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So from my side, with my friend suggestion, expectations are one is
Mm-hmm,
just I want to understand theoretically the concept, what concept you are going to do in the system. The second point is system setups, then
mm-hmm,
wherever applicable transaction process,
mm-hmm.
and wherever some reporting is applicable in particular module, I just want to understand based on the transaction data which reports can be key reports. So
Okay. Are you talking about the ASCP reports, or are you
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about the reports in general?
in general reports if applicable. I don't know about this this application.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason
Okay.
I'm asking.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
these are my
Um,
expectation, like where I want to just after this training, just I'll be expecting a job somewhere. I want to have a good product knowledge on these modules. So the same
okay.
way it will be,
The
yeah.
only thing I want to restrict myself to ASCP is kind of means I will definitely show you the transactional system, and I will show you I can tell you some of the key reports.
Okay.
And but only thing is it will be good use of time if we restrict ourselves to the transactional data as well as the master data related to ASCP, kind of, you
Okay.
know.
Sure. Sure.
That is the only thing.
Just
Otherwise means I'm open to answer any queries you have.
okay.
Okay, and I can show you the transactional system. As you said, I can first give you a brief theory of what it is
Yeah.
and what are
Just
expected out of
yeah.
you,
My
or
that's my simple expectation is just a simple concept. If we are going with so say bomb application, so just I want
Mhm.
to understand overview. What is the purpose of bomb? Just a few
Okay, yeah,
points.
yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah, yeah.
whatever the
Done,
setup
done.
we are doing again, what purpose of that setup? Then based
Okay,
on that,
okay.
anyway, we'll do the transaction the same. Just this is what I'm expecting, so that it will be good information
Right.
for me to go and sell anywhere.
Sure, sure, sure. That I can do.
Okay, great, great. That's what. Yeah, that's what. I don't have any other questions. And see here, just I through this
Okay.
demo, I can understand your product knowledge and experience. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the demo. I'll
Right. So I hope I hope that I have been able to give some value add to you, and you will definitely use this in your career. I really hope so. And
sure.
it was a very nice and interactive session
Yeah,
with good students. So
yeah,
thank you very much for joining, and have a nice rest of the day.
yep. Thanks, Aditya. I'll just contact Lakshman and I'll just speak to him for
Sure,
further process. Yeah.
sure, sure.
Thanks, Aditya. Thank you so